I'm going to do this on a program called Krita. It's a open source free drawing software. I'm using a drawing tablet on the computer and recording off the desktop. I'm just going to be drawing this simple geometric object with lighting on it, the sphere. And first of all, I'm beginning by putting in construction lines, just to help me draw it. This is all speeded up. Next stage, I'm just going to sort of put in a sort of basic tonality, which is sort of like a mid-tone, which indicates the fact that the ball itself is not white, except maybe the very, very highest light on the reflection. There are a general mid-tone. Next, I'm filling in the core shadow, darkening the tone there. It's these things which will give volume to the ball. The reflection of the ground, the double shadow cast by the lamp in the shadow of the ball. Now the deep core shadow of the cast shadow that indicates where the ball is sitting on the ground, really, just intensifying the shadows. Moving over to a smaller linear drawing mode. Often the combination of diffuse, large shading plus linear hatching like this can look very good in a drawing. Looks better in charcoal than in a digital drawing. So I'm into more intensification using hatching. I'll probably come back in and blur this shortly. That little black square that appears is when I'm using undo. Now I'm blurring using the tools on the left hand side. I'm erasing, I'm cleaning up some of the edges, working on the highlights by erasing a bit. I'm going to shortly add another layer on so that it's not a transparent erasure. It just erases to white, in other words. There, I'm adding a white layer. And it's underneath the drawing. Now I can erase from the drawing and it just appears white. You know, already at this stage you can sort of see the volumes of the sphere are coming out, especially once I start putting in highlights. And here I'm removing some lost edges where even in the photograph you can't see very much distinction between the edge and the background. In the drawing you just remove those edges. I'm trying to make that reflection a bit more realistic in some ways. Now I'm intensifying the reflection of the ground from the ball. The white surface of the table reflected up into the shadow. Removing some of the construction lines. It's a lot of fiddling around. You can make this very realistic, and if I'd used the masking and circular drawing tools and other filters, I could get this very realistic. Just coming back in and re-establishing the darks, making them closer to what they are in the photo. As you can see, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect before it still looks like a ball. And that's a good thing to know. You don't have to copy a photo perfectly in order to achieve the same effect. Ideally, I should take the whole background and make it a sort of a pale grey to make it actually really stand out properly. These are just tidying up, making some effects more strong, like the edge at the darkness there. Just makes the sphere sit more solidly on the ground. Next. Now there's already a sphere in this one, which is nectarine. You can see it looks similar, cast shadows, except that it's got colouring and its own tonality as well in the colouring. Likewise the bananas. I'm just doing a sort of construction. You might notice it's sort of done in segments, nearly straight line segments, because it's simply easier to get angles correct by drawing nearly straight lines. And having done the construction, which I'm going to work from, I'll be able to make modifications and changes to make it more realistic. Yeah, slight modification there. I wanted to get a bit more height, a bit better shape in the banana. Sorry about the dog barking. Here, first step, I'm using hatching to provide a sort of general tonality for areas that are in shade. Not a really dark tonality, just a mid-tone. So that's looking at almost like that banana as a tube that's lit on one side and dark on another. And the sphere in the same way I did the ball before. Even with this sort of very basic tonality, you can sort of see there's a bit of volume coming along. The next stage is to intensify this tonality with a sort of charcoal-like brush stroke. Now here's the first attempts to sort of modify the tones in there, in the sphere-like shape of the nectarine. Now any object like that nectarine is a composite of its local surface tonality or in colour and a sort of generalised tonality provided by the shape. So it's got the tone, it's got a core shadow, for instance, in the middle of the nectarine, which is sort of being done roughly here, there, which relates to its spherical nature. But it's on top of that, it's also got the dark red blush. Here I'm putting in some more detailed darknesses. They're only approximations. If I were to take it to a very fine detail, I could just make it more and more accurate. At this stage we're starting to provide a definition in the shadows and the variation of tone in the shadows. And that's the sort of thing which produces volume. See, I'm just doing some of the lights that are reflected from the surface of the table onto the shadow side of the banana. Using erasers now to take out light patches, remove edges which appear to be disappearing in the photo. Drawing in the darkness underneath the nectarine. Very important. Most things need that darkness under them if they're sitting on a table. They need some dark edge somewhere. You can immediately see it sort of lifts the volume of the bananas and fruit out. Trying to emphasize edges here. Maybe too much emphasis actually, because they seem to be not so obvious in the photo. At this point, all the most basic details of tonality and shadow are already in the picture, and it's just a matter of tightening them up a bit, of making them slightly more accurate all the time now. And you could take this to great extremes, looking on smaller scales even, and get a more relevant, more accurate, photorealistic sort of picture. Reintroducing a bit of shadow here. Again, like before in the case with the sphere, it would probably be a better idea to actually introduce a sort of grey tonal shading into the whole background of the table, because it's not, strictly speaking, white. At this stage it's really just paying very close attention to the very small shifts of tone across a surface, inside the shadows. Always comparing one tone to another if possible.